Hello, aviators. Welcome back to the Finer Points. In this podcast, we're dropping in again with our Friday office hours session. I'm going to talk about the recent fatal accident at Grass Valley Airport. And if you did not know it already, every Friday at 12 p.m. Pacific, I am sitting here at my desk. We do office hours. It's a great aviation community. To learn more about it, please visit patreon.com/learntfp. Also, summer is fast approaching and we do have spots left on our airplane camp trips. If you would like to join us either in the California mountains or at Monument Valley in the fall, or come with us to Baja in November, please visit learnthefinerpoints.com and you'll see the airplane camps link up in the top right there. And lastly, this podcast is brought to you in part by the Ground School app. If you haven't seen this app, it is an amazing tool for proficiency for both new and experienced pilots. There are 4 courses in there: mastering landings, instrument private, standard operating procedures. Come get a free 3-day trial at learnthefinerpoints.com. All right, without any further ado here, let me give you a quick setup and then I will drop you right into last Friday's office hours. Now, this office hours session contained a lot of things. We talked about, where your approach speed comes from. We talked about the IFR departure procedure from San Carlos. There is a full summary of what we talked about, and the entire session is up at Patreon. But I did promise on Instagram that I would get into the fatal accident that happened last week at Grass Valley, and that is what I'm going to share with you here. Now, keep in mind, there's no real data back yet, right? I mean, this thing just happened, and if you're in this industry long enough, you find yourself in proximity to these types of accidents. This is not the first time I've been close to an aviation accident. Of course, friends of mine at AOPA have been lost over the years. So anyway, this is something that does happen in this industry from time to time. Although this particular accident was close to me in the sense that this was a new student coming to fly with me. This was going to be our first lesson, and I was meant to go up in the aircraft with him. Now, we don't have any information yet, so I'm not trying to cast any blame on anybody here. I'm going to keep the entire thing anonymous. I'm not going to tell you his name. I'm not going to tell you the N number. We really don't know what happened. So everything that I'm sort of processing through here in this office hours is kind of that. It's just me kind of processing through my initial thoughts. And regardless of what happened, some of these thoughts are valid for us to consider one way or another. So in the interest of learning what we can from these horrible, tragic experiences, let's just dive in here. We did about 30 minutes of office hours before we finally got to this. So I decided to, by the way, keep one office hours topic after this debrief in there. It was about the old Cessna 172s with the 145 horsepower and 40 degrees flaps. But anyway, so first we're going to talk about the accident, then we'll answer that question. And if you want to see this complete session, please visit patreon.com/learntfp. Let's go. Joe, did you have something?
Yeah. Did you want to get to that Grass Valley
Yeah,
incident?
I did. I wanted to tell you guys. So yesterday there was a client coming in to fly with me. The first flight we'd ever fly together. He was flying, he came up on Tuesday. It was the first time I met him, and we talked about the plan. We talked about his aircraft. I took a list of equipment that he had, looked at pictures of his panel, looked over his logbook. We designed a training plan. We were together for probably 45 minutes, and then we decided that yesterday was going to be our first flight. It was going to be our
Mhm.
template flight 1 for me, which is just point to point in the system. We were going to fly to Stockton along airways in the system and just sort of see the whole thing from a bird's eye view. And I had already flown. I had a lesson yesterday morning from like 7 to 8:30. So I was just back from that lesson, standing at the fuel pump, and I saw him come over the top of the airport. It was really windy yesterday, really strong flow out of the northeast. So it was like one of those days where at Grass Valley, there's runway 725. Let me see, I can kind of even show you guys for anyone that doesn't know what it looks like. There we go. Let's see. So yeah, here at Grass Valley, there's runway 725, and Yesterday was runway 7, so the winds were coming pretty much straight out of, see Banner Mountain up there? The winds were coming hard from Banner Mountain and almost out of the due north. And it was such a strong flow. We were running left traffic for runway 7, and it was one of those days where when you turn final, you just felt like an elevator. Like even though we were a mile high when we turned final, we had to add power to make the runway because it was just like we're just not even hardly going forward at all. It was just one of those days. And then when you turn crosswind, you better crab, and when you turn downwind, there's all sorts of illusions. And so this gentleman was coming across like a midfield downwind entry. He crossed the midfield like that. I was standing at the fuel island talking to my to the airport manager. I looked up, I saw the cardinal. I said, "That's my guy. My guy's here. I better go." I didn't want him to get to my hangar before I got to my hangar. So I jumped in the plane in my 172 and I fired it up. I heard him make a call on the radio saying he was turning base. And I remember thinking, I better hurry up or this guy's going to beat me to the hangar, which would not wasn't the way I wanted to start the lesson. So I taxied over to my hangar and I parked the plane right in front of the hangar because I was going to be leaving again after this next lesson. And by the time I shut down and got out, the airport manager came running up to me just saying, "Your guy just had an engine failure." And it was like, I could hardly believe it. I mean, like, he was just on base. Like, I just heard him turn base. So it was like, I didn't know where he went. And I waited for a few minutes to just let that sink in to see, is this real? And he never showed up on the runway. So I didn't want to jump in a car to go see where he was. I jumped in the plane and took off to go see if I could see where he was. Actually, there was a biplane running pattern work too that actually landed, and I talked to him, and he verified he saw the plane go down. He said, "Yeah, he crashed. I saw him crash," and that guy was pretty shaken up. And so I jumped in the 172, took off, and went and found the location of where my student was, and I took one look at the accident and realized it was a fatal accident. There was really nothing left of the airplane. There was no,
Mhm.
he just he kind of went straight in. Um, where did he end up? So you see this housing development right here. I believe he was trying to make a right downwind for that, but he ended up right here on this Idaho Maryland road, or Whispering Pines rather, right over there where Whispering Pines curves. Looked like he was trying to make a right turn and then turn back into that empty housing development. But he had clipped a couple pine trees and just gone straight in. And so we don't know. Obviously, we don't know what happened. The NTSB is going to do an investigation and figure it out. There was no post-crash fire, so that's a data point worth noting. Usually, when there's fuel on board the aircraft, there's a fire, especially when you hit that hard. Um, but it just the instant takeaways for me is like I remember Richard, my sadistic mentor, the guy that loved to torture me, just it lives in my brain. And what Richard used to do to me every single time I was flying a traffic pattern and I got so far away from the runway that we couldn't glide there, Richard would pull my power to idle and say, "Where are you going now? What are you going to do now?" And it was always East Oakland. I'm looking at East Oakland. I'm like, "I'm not going anywhere." He's like, "Exactly. Give me the power back. Fly closer. Fly from a position where you could glide to the runway. You don't ever want to be in the traffic pattern unless you can glide to the runway. I don't. There's a perfectly good runway right there, and you're going to crash in East Oakland. Like, I mean, all the time, just giving me a hard time about it. And to this day, that's why I teach power off. It's one of the reasons why I teach power off approaches. And I hear from, I don't, I think like I'm one of the only guys that does that. And I hear a lot of CFIs tell me, well, I don't do that. Your student doesn't have enough time to like line up, or your student needs more time to find the aiming point, or your student needs this, or your student needs that. And it's like, okay, maybe. But the reason we do that is if you ever lose your engine in the traffic pattern for any reason, engine failure or any other reason, you have a perfectly good runway right there. You can glide to the runway.
I see.
and you're constantly practicing this glide technique. I remember you can do this in any airplane, by the way. I remember Dan Greider called me careless and reckless for doing a power off approach in a 210, but whatever. If it has wings and your CHTs are below 240, you can pull the power to idle in any airplane. You can fly power off approaches in Cirrus. You can fly power off approaches in Bonanzas, 210s. There's not a light airplane outside of twin engine. I mean, not a light single that I've ever flown that you can't make a power off approach. And so I know we can't always do this. I mean, I really do. I know that there are times where this isn't realistic. You're number three, for example, in a pattern. But, and again, I don't want to be too critical of this poor gentleman who had the accident yesterday, but he was 100 feet AGL when he turned base, just 100 feet above the runway elevation when he turned base. That's really low. I mean, he's flying in a way where he's depending on the engine. Like you're just depending on the engine. And so, like, if we do that, or if you have to extend your downwind at different airports, it's like that whole monkey thing. Like, where are you going to go? If you're not going to go to the runway, where are the spots in the traffic pattern that you're going to try to go to? And so, anyway, that has been with me for the last 24 hours. Just some validation that power off approaches are worth it. They're worth practicing, and just Richard's old adage about always being in a place you can glide to the runway. The second thing that we all hear all the time, but that was like highlighted for me in this accident was this was such a windy day. So being aware of where the surface winds are coming from, if this guy had just turned into the wind and deployed his flaps and opened the doors and kept the aircraft under control, he could have practically flown into the side of a mountain and been okay. I mean, I was not okay, but survived. I was up there and I'm telling you, our forward ground speed on final was like 20 knots, 25 knots. We were
Mm,
barely moving. And I know he wouldn't have made the runway, and our runway is on a hill, and there's a bunch of shrubs and trees and things like that on the side of the hill. But I know, I'm pretty convinced, I fully believe that had he just flown into the side of that hill, right into those trees at a slow forward airspeed under control, this would have been a survivable accident. Instead, he turned downwind. So instead of adding 30 knots to the nose, he added 30 knots to the tail, right? So that's a huge difference when it comes to impact forces. If your aircraft, let's say, if you can get it to fly in at 55 knots, right, you're just kind of right on that stall. If you're into a 25 knot wind, right, how fast are we going? 30 knots. But if you got
mm.
25 knot wind on your tail, now you're going 80 knots. And that's what happened. He turned downwind, and I don't know if he was unaware of where the winds were coming from or if he just wasn't thinking of it at this point. But it wasn't very defensive flying. It wasn't like that paranoid Richard attitude of keep yourself in a position where you can glide to the runway, know where your landing sites are, and expect your engine to fail so that you turn into the wind immediately when it does that. This was something other than that. This was depending on the engine. And if it turns out it was a fuel exhaustion situation, that's even worse, where it's like, I don't know. I mean, we looked into it. There's some evidence to suggest. I mean, he fueled up 2 weeks ago in Auburn, where he's based. He flew 3 hours since that particular fuel up, and he was coming up to Grass Valley to fly with me on a long flight. And Grass Valley has the cheapest fuel around, so there are people locally speculating that maybe he was just planning on fueling up at Grass Valley when he got up to see me. And we won't know again until the end. It could be a mechanical failure of some kind. But statistically, most mechanical failures happen in high power situations, not like when you pull the power down on base leg and that kind of thing. Um, what else did we learn from it? I guess that's about it. Those two things and then the thing that's been hard for me is just that I do fly in the mountains. And there are a lot of places I fly where there are no options. There just are. And just so seeing something like that happen is just a reminder that we have to do our best to try to be that monkey. Where would I go right now? And I do that when I come in. I've been flying in and out of Grass Valley now for like what, 5 years. I do that when I'm on the 45. I'm thinking I'm going to the fairgrounds. I'm going to the fairgrounds. I'm going to the fairgrounds. Okay, now I'm going to the runway. When I fly at night out of Grass Valley, I circle climb to 6,500 before I leave the airport area. And when I come back, I'm at 7,500. I can basically glide to Auburn before I'm in the pattern at Grass Valley. I mean, it's very defensive flying, I think. But to be fair to this guy, if this is the other part, I guess I'll just be honest about. If it was a fuel exhaustion situation, I have to say I really understand. I've been commuting a lot. I have a new student in San Carlos. I've been going down to Palo Alto a lot, so I've just been commuting a lot. I'm gone at I'm gone early, 7 a.m. and I'm not back till 6:30 or 7:30 sometimes. And I've been sitting on the ground. And like just 2 days ago, I was on the ground in the run-up area at Palo Alto and looking at my fuel gauges, and they're just under half tanks. And I have like an hour and a half flight in front of me. And I remember my thought process was like, if I take off now, like my flight time is an hour and 20 minutes, I'll see the kids for 30 minutes before they go to sleep. Like that's like if I go now, if I get fuel, I might not see him at all. Like it'll be 8 o'clock and I will have not seen the kids at all today. So like I was gone before they got up and I'll be home after they go to sleep. It's really important to me that I see my kids every day if I can. It's part of the reason I'm a flight instructor, and it's just, just like a family guy, and I just love my kids. And so I remember like the rationalization going on. Like I was like, well, if I really need gas, I could always stop at Sacramento Executive, or as I get closer to Grass Valley, I could just stop and fuel up. Like this is what I'm doing in my mind. And then I realized, well, if I do that, it's going to add more time. Like by the time I maneuver to land, go to the fuel island there, and then take off again, it's like, okay, whatever, I'll just taxi over to the fuel island. But in retrospect, like the struggle that I was having with myself was inappropriate. I shouldn't have even been struggling like that. I should have just gone to the fuel island, but that stuff's real. And it's like, that's what Brian Schiff and I are doing a talk on standard operating procedures on May 8th on the Schiff Show. This is why, at the end of the day, for me, safety boils down to SOPs, because it's easy to stay safe in the training environment. It really is. If it's a little cloudy, you don't go. You make a good, smart decision. Or if it's a little too windy, you don't go. But in reality, when you're so comfortable in the airplane, or anybody who's ever owned a motorcycle, when it feels like it's part of your body, and and the plane feels like it's part of your body, it comes down to making these tough calls when no one's watching. There's
Hmm.
no there's no cockpit voice recorder. There's no black box flight data recorder. There's no first officer sitting next to you that's going to tell operations. There's nobody watching. It's like on you. And you know, external pressures are real and sometimes self-imposed, but like stupid things like I just want to see my kids. Or maybe this guy was saying to himself he was going to be late. Maybe he was going to be late and it was the first flight with Jason, and he wanted to show up as a diligent student, and he was pretty sure that he had enough fuel to get here. It's only 10 minutes away from Auburn to Grass Valley, and Grass Valley has cheap fuel anyway, and he has to fuel up, and we're going to Stockton. He's like, I don't want to be late on the first day. I'm probably fine. I'm just going to go and fuel up when I get there. Maybe that was the thought process. And I can't say well, I can certainly understand it. And anyway, so it's just a reminder to sort of live by these rules, like as if you're going to get fired if you don't. And anyway, those are some takeaways for me. Jim, did you have something to add?
Just real quick, thank you for sharing all that, Jason. It's always so heart wrenching when it's someone we know.
Mhm.
But your thing about turn into the wind, I think pilots overall do a good job understanding. Well, of course, we're going to turn into the wind, for landing, for emergencies. But you reminded me of something I heard many years ago. Rod Machado had a recording where he actually did the math to figure out how many G's you would pull if you crashed over so many feet. You remember hearing that?
Yeah,
Uh,
I do.
it's kind of interesting. And of course, we can't always control what we're crashing into. But like Dave said, kinetic energy is mass times velocity squared. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
speed really does kill. And it was, I don't know, I just remember as a young flight instructor listening to Rod and just thinking, wow, like that's kind of important to think about. Like, what can I do to spread the accident out over as much space as possible?
Right.
Spread out the deceleration and to make sure that whatever I impact, I'm doing it at the slowest safe speed. And I don't
Yeah.
know, it just kind of got me thinking.
No, it's real. It's real. And Peter Lurt does that talk on our airplane camp trips about, and it's shocking actually how little space you need if you can stretch it even just a little bit. Can't remember what the exact numbers were, but it's like 90 knots can decelerate at 1G and something like 270 feet or something very, if it's a smooth deceleration, it doesn't take much space at all. And then that G deceleration graph just gets deadly above. I think it's like that's why twins are so much the accidents in twins are so much more statistically fatal. Is just add that extra 15 or 20 knots, and all of a sudden, people just don't survive it. So yeah, flying a controlled crash into the wind in a single engine airplane. I mean, they have to stall below 61 knots. That's part of the certification. Questionable in the case of Cirrus, in my mind. Like I don't know. If you get Cirrus
Well,
anywhere
I was
near
going to
that
say
slow, it's
real
dodgy.
quick on Cirrus. We have fun teasing the parachute and everything, but what we're talking about here with these G forces on impact, like even if you've got a road, it looks like a nice dirt road,
Hmm.
pull the parachute.
Yeah,
Because I
100%.
mean, you're going so fast, you are gliding so fast in a Cirrus that
Yeah,
all it takes is one little invisible fence post to kill you.
that's right.
Pull the parachute.
100%. Yeah, no, I didn't, and I don't make fun of it. I love having the parachute. Honestly, like it's another tool in the safety box, really. But yeah, and it's a good thing because like you can't really get a serious, I mean, anything close to 60 knots and you're basically falling out of the sky. I don't know how anyway, maybe they didn't certify it because of the chute, but most single engine airplanes stall below 61. So if you basically just point into the wind and fly it through the crash and keep the airplane flying, it'll probably be a survivable event. Um, so Joe, did you have something else or is your hand just still up?
Oh, I had something else, but I wanted to give you plenty of time to kind of debrief, process all of that. And again, thanks for sharing that
Sure. Yeah.
experience. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if we do have time, yeah, I do have a quick question regarding mixture settings. A new CFI out in Carson and Winnemucca. I'm working for a guy at Winnemucca in
Hmm.
a 172G model, golf model,
Hmm.
145 horsepower, which is considerably lower than what I'm used to in the club out of Carson City that I usually fly in, that I've learned in. And it always just kind of feels like one, I had, very similar to when we did some partial power takeoffs during the mountain flying course,
Hmm.
and you really didn't necessarily feel that ground separating from, separation as quickly as I was used to.
Yeah.
Setting the mixture on this G model, 145 horsepower, as if I'm doing it with the normal club planes that I'm flying and teaching out of, is doesn't seem to be appropriate enough. It seems like the G model, which is a kind of a push pull, a mixture mechanism,
Mm.
if you'd want to put it in much further than your peak RPM. And
Why does it feel
um,
like that? Why would you want to put it in more than the peak RPM?
yeah, so that's the way the owner prefers it, and that's where he suggests putting it, right? But when I do my normal procedure on setting the mixture, pull it out, lose the RPM, push it back in all the way to peak RPM, and basically stay just, slightly lean. It seems like I get no power difference in this model, both on EGTs, CHTs, or on my RPM, if I were to put it in the position where I put it in, compared to where he suggests putting it in. But at the same time, when I fly with him, it seems like I get a much better power and climb gradient, a much better power output, and better climb performance in his position versus mine. And even when I do use my position, I had a bit of a pucker factor on a go around and our initial takeoff. Like, are we going to climb out of Winnemucca right now, or do I
Yeah.
need to start looking for a spot? And
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a difference between, 160 horsepower with backflow that we see in the club versus a 145
Oh,
horsepower
that's a
engine.
huge difference. And don't you love
Yeah.
that they gave you 40 flaps in the G model too? It's like perfect. Not enough
Yeah.
power, 40 degrees of
Yeah.
flaps.
Right.
Woo!
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like, yeah, when are we going to use that? Right. And
It's like
so
a
it's
recipe
it's
for
really,
disaster.
And when I get hired for this position, it's like you're going to learn how to fly a wing, and I'm like,
You
okay,
sure are.
cool,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so my room for error. So this is one piece for me. It's a new CFI, right? Coming from a much higher powered aircraft, learning in those things, learning in that environment, and now I have to teach in a newer environment and a newer aircraft with lower power output or better lower performance.
Yeah.
And so my first question really is, can you
Sorry,
think of
one
any
sec,
reason?
Joe, real quick.
Yep.
Sorry. Hey, babe. Oh, it's still on? Will you tell Mama? Tell her that the car's still on. Thank you. All right. Sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for your time.
No, yeah,
Can you
yeah.
think of any reason why you might get a better power performance um, when I'm setting that mixture in further, but I see no objective data that tells me I'm getting a higher burn rate or a better RPM. It's maybe 25, 50. It just
Yeah,
nudges,
I would
right?
just, yeah, I think it's just I don't think that the measurement tools are precise enough to reflect it, right? Like, let
Okay.
me, like when I flew, when I was managing the 2008 SR-22, whatever that was, the G4, I think it was,
Hmm.
right? You had to keep the CHTs below 380 on climb out. And I knew from flying that airplane that the moment that I got the fuel burn, it would like you could have it at 17.0 and the temperatures would still be going up. But as soon as I got it to 16.8, they would start to trend down. Right. That's
Hmm.
how precise the mixture movement was. And nothing was different in that mixture movement other than going from 17.0 to 16.8 on the fuel burn. And the only reason I knew that is because this is digital equipment with these fine sensors and this digital readout. You're talking about a really old Cessna with a push-pull mixture knob, and the only thing that you can really use to measure the effectiveness is the actual tachometer, which sometimes even just does stuff like this, right? Like
Yeah,
you
right.
wouldn't be able to see a needle width move, and if you could.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's the few thoughts. The first one is knowing an airplane is really knowing an airplane. Like if the owner or the guy that's flying up there knows the plane and knows where the
Yep.
that's based on experience. I would probably
Yes.
treat that as very, very valuable information.
I
I
do,
think, but
absolutely.
I think the reason that it's not that you're like, why is my setting not working? It's just because there's not a precise enough measurement. If you guys had like even a JPI like EDM 700 engine monitor or something,
Yeah.
probably find data to see why that's true, that to
Okay.
see what's changing. But I just don't think there's precise enough ways to measure what's happening. And let me make sure I
Okay.
understand your setting is you pull it back until you feel the power drop, and then you just bring it back into what you perceive to be peak tachometer.
Correct. Yes.
And he's doing that, but then he's going rich a little bit of that.
No, that's the funny thing is that he'll pull it back until he gets the peak or the drop in the RPM, but then he really just pushes it back to basically, like half of that knuckle, right? Half
Yeah.
of that index finger or
Yeah.
portion of that index finger. He's like right about there. Like
Yeah. He just
for a
knows
left
it.
side brain thinker, that's not enough for me, and I want
Yeah.
values, right? And so yeah, learning,
Yeah, it's
life
funny.
learning.
Again, my mentor, always used to say a pilot doesn't have to know the truth, just that predictable inputs achieve predictable results.
Thank you.
All right, aviators, I hope you got something out of that. I will let you know as we learn more about this accident. And those are just great thoughts for us to consider one way or another, regardless of what happened here. These are good reminders for us to fly safely, to fly conservatively. If you're looking for a complete set of standard operating procedures, just get a free trial of the Ground School app. There is a mini course there that goes through all of the SOPs that I teach. Remember to consider joining us this summer or this fall on an airplane camp trip. The lecture that Peter Lert does about deceleration and the shared experience we have among that experienced group of instructors is really beneficial. A few of these instructors have been through aircraft crashes and survived. So it's really hard to describe the kind of learning that takes place when you're just able to sit around a campfire and have a beer or just talk with them in depth. So Great education on the airplane camp trips. Please consider joining us. We still have room. And after you share this podcast far and wide and leave us a review on the iTunes store, the most important thing is that you be safe and fly your best. I'm Jason Miller, and I'll see you guys on the next one.